I discovered the 1902 kosher beef boycott story in 2016 after seeing a framed news article about it on a restaurant wall. Well, I was intrigued. I did nothing with it for about a year. I was writing another television show called Exile, which I describe as a Cuban Count of Monte Cristo, but that's literally a whole nother story. So in 2017, I decided to take a closer look at the kosher beef boycott event. As it turns out, it was even more fascinating than I initially anticipated. Originally, I envisioned it as a feature film, but then after a year of research and then having started writing it, my feelings about it changed. When I hit the 200-page mark, I decided on a few things. First, there was simply way too much story. There was too much to fit into 90 minutes or 2 hours of a screenplay, which generally runs anywhere from 90 to 120 pages. So I shifted gears and decided to use all of this material and repurpose it as a limited TV series. At 200 pages, I had written enough material for 3 or 4 episodes of a TV show. Plus, with all my additional notes, the show is wholly framed out for an entire series and puts me at around 6 one-hour episodes, an ideal length for a limited series television show. So, there are several elements of the story's actual events set against this extraordinary period at the turn of the 20th century that really got my attention. The boycott story, as I've written it, leans heavily on real-life incidents. Still, at the same time, it is also significantly fictionalized. While the show's major through line and primary characters revolve around Fanny and Sarah, the women who initiated the boycott and their lives as mothers and homemakers, and now as rebels and troublemakers who don't seem to know their place in a world of societal and religious patriarchy, it's also the introduction of numerous secondary characters that creates a very full world that allows us to explore life from all different perspectives in New York City in the 1900s, which I found to be fascinating. For example, the paper said Fanny Levy had children, but we knew nothing about them. Her entire family and the 6 children, I created all those characters. That element of the narrative structure allows me to introduce children as significant supporting characters in the overall story, apart from what their mother is doing to lead this rebellious action. In fact, the children end up being so compelling, I've envisioned a spin-off show based on one of the female child characters. There's a teaser here. The next show takes place about 10 years later, and the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory plays a large part in the setting of that show. Now, I know a lot of you watching this know about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. Then there are her boycott followers. In my research, the newspapers reported the names of various women arrested, and honestly, there were a lot. I created a small ensemble cast of her boycott supporters, and they too play not only fun, but an essential role in the show. Characters like 54 years old Polish immigrant Louise Finkelstein, or 58 years old Russian immigrant Rosa Peskin, and others. Then there's a whole cadre of kosher butchers. Some are good guys and some are not such good guys. I'll share a few other insights from a dramatic point of view. First and foremost, it was a female-driven story. I liked that fact a lot, and it's what really drew me in considerably to the story. The incident in question unfolded over barely 3 weeks, making it a sort of contained period. So from a storytelling point of view, it's always good to have a clear in point and a clear out point, and we had that here. Then, through the research, what emerged for me was the clear primary villains of the story and the conspirators, namely the cattle barons. It was them who conspired to raise the cost of kosher beef. After all, it was the increase in the cost of beef that was the triggering incident for the entire event. It's what set everything in motion and was the underlying theme of the show. Having landed on this secretive cabal of industrialists, I drew connections to the story's larger overarching theme and actual event. I've separately written a historical thesis-style paper with these historical discoveries that can be seen on the Boycott website. In dramaturg terms, Boycott is, at its core, an overcoming the monster or a David versus Goliath story. It's a fight against institutional as well as personal hubris and greed. It's a conspiracy story, and ultimately, it's a revenge and also a redemption story. The women win, even if the price increase is temporary. There are much larger institutional victories at play that we, as a society, still benefit from. All because Fanny and Sarah decided they had enough and they had the nerve to protest. I hope you enjoy the music. I hope you enjoy the message. I hope you enjoy the story. After the videos, we'll have a chance for some questions and answers. For now, enjoy the show.
Hello, I'm Avi Hoffman. I am a stage and voice actor and singer, and I am extremely excited to have worked with Jeff Mustard, the writer, producer, and creator of the fascinating television series of musical stage play, Boycott. Your actions, though, make us seem misunderstood. Sarah Adelson? What are you ladies doing here?
Oi, Gewalt. It's so hot. I can't take it. Will the sewing never stop? Boycott beef.
Yeah,
Boycott beef.
do it like that.
We must boycott the kosher beef. Everyone, boycott kosher beef. Oi, Gewalt. No way. A price increase we cannot pay. Not tomorrow. Not tomorrow. Today. A kosher beef price increase? There is me. No way. Back to Russia. Back to Poland. No. 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 Bust the trust. Bust the trust. Bust the trust. Not tomorrow. Not tomorrow. Not tomorrow. Today. A kosher beef price increase. There is beer. No way. No way. No way. This kosher beef price increase simply cannot be.
Hit it.
Too much profit, too much greed.
Yeah.
How much money do you need?
it like
Too
that.
much profit, too much greed. How much profit do you need?
Yeah.
Imagine, just imagine the pain, the dread, the pain, the dread. Imagine, just imagine the pain and the dread. Oh! Gewalt, it's so hot. I can't take it. Will the sewing never stop? Boycott beef. Boycott beef. We must boycott kosher beef.
Hit it.
In 1902, the women of New York City's Lower East Side band together, creating the first ever all-female-led boycott to protest a dramatic increase in the price of beef by the nation's most powerful business monopoly.
As the tagline of the musical stage play says, resistance never sounded so good.
Do it like that.
We hope you enjoy our work.
Today, a kosher beef price increase? There is beer. No way.
The real-life incidents of the 1902 kosher beef boycott, lasting barely more than 2 weeks, made national headlines, capturing the attention of President Theodore Roosevelt. The boycott's feverish rallies, public agitation, violent protests involving tens of thousands, property destruction, and mass arrests spread to cities throughout the country.
No way. No way. No way. This kosher beef price increase simply cannot be.
This co-female-led period thriller, supported by a mostly female ensemble cast, is set in motion when the Big Six, the nation's largest cattle barons, Swift and Armour among them, illegally conspire to increase the price of kosher beef. The price increase infuriates the Jewish community, threatening to prevent Jews from purchasing kosher meat, something they had grown easily accustomed to.
Yeah.
Imagine, just imagine the pain, the dread, the pain.
The cattle barons are met with a surge of unexpected resistance, triggering a chain of events in this rapidly unfolding David versus Goliath story, as two women, Fanny Levy, a mother of 6 children, and Sarah Edelson, the owner of a small kosher restaurant, forge an unlikely alliance that neither is equipped to undertake. Together, defying all odds, they confront the powerful beef industry with results no one could have imagined.
Profit, too much greed. How much money do you need?
Like
Too
that.
much profit, too much greed.
Like
How
that.
much profit do you need?
This prestige, family-friendly period thriller suited for network, cable, or streaming platforms brings to life in dramatic, historical fashion societal issues and challenges of the day.
Issues of immigration, racism, bigotry, discrimination, women's subservient role in the home and the workplace, labor issues, patriarchy, male dominance in the workplace, all themes at the forefront of contemporary American society.
How much profit do you need?
Levy, Sarah Adelson, two women no one knows.
Theodore Roosevelt is alerted to a beef boycott in New York City's Lower East Side. And Roosevelt has an opportunity based upon this protest and rallies that are started by Fannie Levy and Sarah Adelson to leverage that politically into injunctions that are served against the Big Six, which is an opportunity for Roosevelt to exact his revenge on the Big Six cattle barons, mainly because in 1898, during the Spanish-American War in Cuba, the military contracted with the meatpackers, and they served them embalmed and putrid and toxic beef, and thousands of Roosevelt's troops died. Now there's an opportunity for him to get revenge now that he's president, which in May 1902, so it's about 4 years later, and Roosevelt never really thought that he would find himself in a position to get revenge, and now there's an opportunity to do that. And so he's commissioning his Attorney General Philander Knox to draft injunctions to do that very thing.
Beef price increase. To this, the women of the Lower East Side in New York City, they say no.
A beef price increase? Aha! This cannot be, unless Armour Swift, Cudahy, they must all agree.
Barons Beware is a song that represents a pivotal aspect of the boycott story. It's the moment when President Roosevelt learns of the kosher beef boycott unfolding in New York City's Lower East Side. He's made aware of the incident by his Attorney General Philander Knox. In this moment, for a theatrical stage version, this scene provides great historical insight, as well as the personal nature of the powerful and negative impacts the Big Six cattle barons had on the lives of not just Americans, but President Roosevelt, whose troops suffered from the consumption of toxic beef when they fought in the 1898 Spanish-American War.
The time has come for this story to be told. Let history records show Teddy Roosevelt would be bold.
The song has three components: a dialogue exchange between Knox and Roosevelt, where Roosevelt is alerted to the protests and rallies in New York City.
President Roosevelt, sir, I think you should see this now. Tomorrow may be too late.
Too late. I see. Well, if it's that important, tell me right away. What's it say?
Second part, a distinct movement of the song, transitions into a musical dialogue exchange between Knox and Roosevelt. This exchange illuminates the potential political benefits to Roosevelt for interceding and taking a public stand.
Aha! Now I think back to 1898. The cattle barons, Armour Swift, Morris, you made a mistake. It's time to get even, to settle the score. My troops you poisoned with embalmed beef in the Spanish-American War.
The third part is a Roosevelt solo. Knox exits and Roosevelt performs a hip-hop rap exposition, revealing the history and backstory of Roosevelt as Rough Rider. The song goes into the fascinating and important time in history where Roosevelt was the leader of the cavalry when he went to Cuba, and how his troops were poisoned by toxic beef supplied by the Big Six, which led to the death of many troops and the embalmed beef scandal that followed.
The cattle barons, the Big Six, they shall be no more. My men got sick, many needlessly died. Your hubris, your greed, because you had lied. My men got sick, many needlessly died. Your hubris, your greed, because you had lied.
Fanny, where are you going so early on this fine Saturday morning? To the market to get us something to eat?
No, Ezra. To meet Sarah and the women of Ward 10 on the street to continue to protest the price of kosher meat.
This highly rhythmic speak-sing duet between Fanny and her husband Ezra, it establishes the personal strife that has been lurking beneath the surface between husband and wife, owing to Fanny's involvement in the boycott.
Not so fast. Not today. Not on your life. Woman, you are my wife. You will do as I say.
The women should be seen and not heard philosophy prevails, remembering, of course, that this is 1900, and as the lyrics say, women should know their place. In the streets they shall not roam. Naturally, these are painful and frustrating circumstances and conditions in which to live.
Please step aside. Ridiculous. Absurd. Fanny, there's nothing you can do.
The message of the scene becomes clear, demonstrating the desperate, bottled-up frustrations coming to a head, revealing a never-before-experienced confrontation between Fanny and Ezra, as Fanny prepares to exit the apartment on this Shabbos morning.
A new dawn has begun. Through the streets the women run, their actions unbridled, no longer derided, their spirits set free. The only way you can get me to stay here, Ezra Levy, is to handcuff me! Thematically, this song underscores the challenges Fanny, and by default and extension all of the women, face at this time. The religious and secular views on women to be homemakers, and the pressures for women to follow mores and sacred traditions that are dictated by the Jewish faith. Step aside signals, for the first time, Fanny's ability to summon courage to defy her husband's wishes, his command even. You'll do as I say. You are my wife. You will not walk out that door. I forbid you to go.
I say no, Fanny Levy. No, what's more, the rabbis, they agree with me.
And yet, Fanny does walk out the door. Fanny chooses to pursue something that her husband and the Jewish community at large, mainly the Orthodox men, felt was wrong, inappropriate, and not suitable for a Jewish woman. As Ezra says, "You are a disgrace to the Jewish faith." And to drive the point home, painfully he says, "You have brought shame to our family name."
Ezra, I refuse to heed. These protests and rallies, in case you hadn't noticed, I lead.
Things are about to change. Fanny's defiance against her husband is a signaling moment. The boycott represented for the first time a release valve for women to both bond and express themselves as never before.
I hope this is not beyond repair.
Well, we'll just have to see. It's all I can say. It's incredible to me that you could feel this way, all because I'm making my own way.
The burdens of labor and loneliness bear heavily on the women in the country. Their welfare should be the especial concern of all of us. Everything possible should be done to make life in the country profitable, so as to be attractive from the economic standpoint.
Hello, ladies of Ward 10. Are we ready to show the men where the true power resides? On the Lower East Side, let's do this.
Boycott beef, bust the trust, no more monopoly. Boycott beef, bust the trust, no more monopoly.
Set New York City's Lower East Side circa 1900, this co-female-led period thriller supported by a mostly female ensemble cast is set in motion when the Big Six, the nation's largest cattle barons, Swift and Armour among them, illegally conspired to increase the price of kosher beef, threatening to prevent Jews from purchasing kosher meat, something they had grown easily accustomed to.
All the Hebrews must know, just how we feel about our kosher meal. To the temple we go. All the Hebrews must know, just how we feel about our kosher meal. Women, no longer in silence. This number, Fanny's Fury, represents the pivotal moment of Fanny's personal growth and her character's transformational arc. The same emotional impact and enlightenment will be true for her close boycott colleagues by the end of this song.
No, boycott will show how far we'll go to strike the cattle barons a blow.
Fanny realizes that her actions are not just about fighting the cattle barons, but now that struggle is a metaphor for her freedom and that of all women. It is this number that highlights and crystallizes this epiphany.
You mean he doesn't see the power of our female might?
And if you can believe it, whether it's even right.
Same here. Me too.
My husband said you're out of your head.
Oh my God, exactly. On the way out the door, he was angry and sore. He almost swore.
The women until now have been engaged on a physical and emotional level in the battle to challenge the cattle barons' imposition, the price increase in the cost of kosher beef. The immediate prior number, Step Aside, that takes place in the Levy apartment has commenced the female co-lead, Fanny's metaphoric growth arc.
Go ahead.
Okay, here goes. Be warned, it was nervy. I felt scurvy, but mostly it disturbed me.
Go ahead, tell us, Fanny. We can take it. Fanny's Fury is no longer just a rally against the cost of kosher beef. It is a rallying cry against oppression and depression. It's not just a song about too much money, too much greed, exacted by the cattle barons on the poor, the meek, the immigrants in the street. It's about being treated fairly, equality, and an opportunity to live free.
My God! That's terrible! That's horrible! He made you sad, and yet you still walked out the door?
Incredible!
Unbelievable! He must have fell to the floor!
Wait, hold on, there's more.
It's about women coming to terms with the historical pressures of blindly following traditions of the ages and following sages. As Fanny says in a spirited, enlightened moment, "We're in America now, we're turning new pages." Fanny, leading the group, will march through the streets of the Lower East Side, going to the Eldridge Street Synagogue.
You threaten, you moan, you think we're afraid, you'll disown, try living on your own.
You threaten, you moan, you think we're afraid, you'll disown, try living on your own. You threaten, you moan, you think we're afraid, you'll disown, try living on your own.
Our aim is to control business, not to strangle it. And above all, not to continue a policy of make-believe strangle toward big concerns that do evil, and constant menace toward both big and little concerns that do well.
So what's the upshot from all of this discovery? Recovery of facts we thought we'd never see. It paints a different picture of U.S. history, and it's pretty compelling.
We think you'd agree.
In this fun, light, hip-hop, rap rhyme manner, the audience discovers how the nation's cattle barons conspire to increase the cost of kosher beef by 50%, thrusting the majority of Eastern European immigrants that reside in New York City, Lower East Side, into never-before-experienced chaos. The women of Ward 10 won't stand for it. They band together for the first time to protest, rally, and boycott against a powerful monopoly.
Fanny and Sarah gotta win, especially when the women of the Lower East Side joined in. And then there was
President Roosevelt.
When he learned of the cattle baron's greed, it planted the seed. Their horrible past deeds of poisoning his troops with embalmed beef during the Spanish-American War. As Roosevelt said when he learned of this action, this was his immediate reaction.
It's a highlights recap of the fantastic historical insights relative to the critical incidents of the 1902 kosher beef boycott. It takes the audience on a musical journey of the show's time and place, offering stunning historical insights into the motivations of President Roosevelt's key backstory prior to his ascendancy as the nation's commander-in-chief, when barely 4 years earlier he volunteered as a Rough Rider to lead the nation's cavalry aiding Cuba in its fight for independence in the 1898 Spanish-American War.
Theodore Roosevelt, oh dear Teddy, you're the friend of the working man. Theodore Roosevelt, Oh dear Teddy, you're the friend of the working man.
The 6 musical compositions hopefully serve as a joyful musical gateway introducing the audience to a thrilling universe of rhythm and rhyme, contrasting with the time and place in the 1900s with the ultra-contemporary music beats.
The laws evolved, so many problems solved. What came next? Creation of the Food and Drug Administration. Its sole intent, protect our flourishing nation from consuming meat that was an abomination.
More in Store is a finale wrap-up song. It revisits some of these critical moments highlighted in the earlier compositions, shedding light not only on the never-before-revealed historical discoveries, but at the same time, delivering an exciting and fantastic historical entertainment musical experience that not only signifies that the show is a work in progress, but that there is more to come. It was 1902. America kinda sorta knew, going through growing pains of the industrial age.
The country's still forming, new world opportunities, immigrants still exploring.
There's so much more of this story in store. We hope we leave you craving for more.
Now it's time to conclude this this fascinating unknown history in time.
A TV series, a Broadway play, maybe even a feature movie someday. We're at the end. We thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Not just for us, but for Fanny and Sarah.
And this opportunity to all get together. The next round of our show you'll come to know
on Facebook and Twitter.
So plan on getting a sitter.
Our boycott show has room to grow, and when we're ready,
we'll let you know. Thank you for coming, all our dear friends. We look forward to seeing you all again. The end.
Obviously, you are an incredibly creative guy to come up with a concept like this. Even the idea of taking a 1902 historical story about a kosher boycott, meat boycott, that I had never heard of, most people I know never heard of, is amazing. I mean, and then to turn it into this. How did you figure this out? When did it occur to you that you could, first of all, when did you learn about the story? And secondly, when did you decide to turn it into this?
Well, there's a lot in there. As they say on CNN, there's a lot to unpack. I discovered the story in 2016, and I saw a framed article with the headline 1902 Kosher Beef Boycott, and I was drawn into that in a very big way. And then I did some research, and I discovered it was just a really rich story with a lot of opportunity. But I was in the middle of doing something else, as I had said in the preview. I was writing another TV show, and I just didn't have the time for it. And so in 2017, when I finished my other project, Exile, I came to work on Boycott, and I spent a year researching it. So 2017 was all research and reading and looking at it and deciding that it was an unbelievably rich story that had so many fantastic elements in it. And so then I started writing it in 2018. And I originally started to write it as a feature film. And I was 200 pages in after like maybe 6 months of writing. And I kind of realized there's too much story here. I can't even consider this as a feature film right now because I still haven't finished it. I have about 4 hours of a TV show written. So there's 6 one-hour episodes to go. And I was involved in writing the show. And when I was at 200 pages, I said, man, I'm just going to turn this into a TV series. And so I kind of restructured the material, and I turned the 200 pages into a pilot episode. The pilot episode is about 70 pages. As you know, and some people who follow me know, that pilot script has won a number of Hollywood recognitions. So that's validating. I'm very pleased with that. But the interesting thing is here that getting a TV show made is like a very hard thing to do, as you know. And then I decided to do something crazier, which was one night I had this just crazy idea after living with this entire project and everything about it and being in New York City at that time, in that period, in that world, which I find fascinating. And I think a lot of people find fascinating because there's a lot of TV and there's a lot of theater set around the Lower East Side, New York City, in that era. And I thought, this would make a really cool stage play. All right, so I had this kind of like vision for it to be a stage play, but not just a stage play, but a musical. So I was like profoundly influenced by Lin-Manuel Miranda's, obviously the show Hamilton. I mean, it was extraordinary. It was revolutionary. It was breakthrough. It was hip hop. It was now. It was everything that we all know it was. And I somehow had some like incredible notion that I would take this story and turn this into a hip hop musical. Now, have I ever written a musical? No. I've written lots of TV and I've written all sorts of things. I mean, for the majority of my adult life, I've been in the film and TV business, and I've written and produced pretty much everything there is to write and produce, but I never wrote music, but I've been around the recording studio quite a bit. And I just started to write the music as a kind of experiment. I mean, it took me 6 weeks to decide on the music, finding some rap beats that I thought were good. And the truth is, I think I told this to you when we first met, but after I wrote the first song, it was an experiment. I had absolutely no idea how it would go, none. And when I wrote it, I actually wrote it, I don't want to say with you in mind, but when I was done with it, and I was thinking about who am I going to get to rap this, because it needed to be.
The first person you think of is Avi Hoffman.
Jewish rap,
all Avi.
The truth is, that is the truth. That's kind of how it really went. I mean, being a South Florida guy and you being a South Florida guy and you being famous for the roles that you play, you just came to mind. And, we never met, obviously, and I sort of called you through referral and, gave you the quick pitch on the show and said, look, man, I want to experiment with this song I wrote. You remember that? I remember that.
Oh, I will never forget that day.
I remember it literally like it was yesterday. And so we, had a coffee at Dunkin' Donuts across from the recording studio. And
That's right.
I had shown you the lyrics in advance because I wanted you to practice them. And it was really an experiment. I had no idea how it was going to go. We didn't video record that first session because I just didn't know what would be with it. And that particular song that I wrote was 148 verses. I mean, it was 14 minutes worth of music. And it was so long that what I did was I cut out all of the choruses and some of the verses, and then that ended up becoming the hip hop version. If you remember, that day we recorded 2 tracks, and so there's a little overlap in some of the lyrics, but you nailed it. It took me, like I said, 6 weeks to just struggle with finding the music. I listened to thousands and thousands of beats. It was a very tough time in the beginning.
Today we live in a time which I find incredibly relevant to the time that you are portraying in this particular piece. The history is repeating itself. They say, if you don't learn from history, you repeat it. Well, guess what? Apparently we didn't learn. So civil rights, human rights, equal rights, boycotts, protests, riots, that was what was happening in the early 1900s. And here we are now. Now, one of the things I found fascinating that I'd like you to share with everybody is that this boycott, kosher meat boycott, right, which I had never heard about and you found, actually influenced the laws of the United States of America. Can you tell us how?
It was a profoundly impactful boycott. Nothing like that had ever been done, and nothing like that, meaning protests and rallies of that nature, had ever been done by women. So this was probably the single most important female social activist movement that ever happened, certainly, at that time. And it got the attention of President Roosevelt. And so that's why it was so impactful. There's news cycles back then, and people got their news from the newspapers a couple times a day. And it was really a few days later that Roosevelt, I kind of envision, I'm pretty sure it happened this way, because he was a very savvy politician, and he knew how to use the media. At least that's what I sort of learned from doing some significant research over a long period of time. And in the show, I portray, I fictionalize what I'm telling you, but I basically portray his becoming aware of the boycotts through that Barons Beware song, which tells the story of Philander Knox as Attorney General, telling Roosevelt about these boycotts. And so this was an opportunity for Roosevelt to sort of seek revenge on the cattle barons, again, as everybody's already now heard a few times from the different videos that we've shown. He had an opportunity to sort of seek revenge on the cattle barons. And that was a big thing for him because his troops, when he led the cavalry in Cuba, were poisoned by embalmed beef. Long story, a little longer, but getting to the punchline there is what ended up happening was Roosevelt served injunctions against the Big Six. And that was the beginning of the end of monopolies. And Roosevelt earned the title the Trust Buster, which I'm sure many people have heard that phrase, and that's where it came from. It came from Roosevelt going after monopolies, and so what ended up happening after that was in 1903. I'm going to read off of a little one sheet that is an interesting historical piece that I produced. People can actually get this on the website. Under historical timeline, and it's reflective of a lot of the research I did. So I'm going to read a couple of bullet points here. In 1903, the Bureau of Corporations was formed as a result of the boycotts, and that mission was to investigate monopolistic practices. The Elkins Act, which restricted railroad rebates that favored the cattle barons, that happened. That was, again, directly a result of the boycott. In 1904, this is really important. Everybody's going to know the name Upton Sinclair from his famous book, The Jungle. Well, he was an investigative journalist. In those days, they were called muckrakers. A lot of people may know that. A lot of people may not know that. But he was one of the early muckrakers, which means he was an investigative journalist. And he did a multi-series piece on the meatpacking industry. And naturally, that led to the publishing of his book, The Jungle, which I'm sure most everybody now knows. And then in 1905, the Supreme Court versus Swift and Company basically declared the monopolies are in fact a trust. They have to disband. Hold on, there's more. And it was, again, this is part of the fascinating thing between these links from these women and what they did and what happened in our country. So a couple of years later, in 1906, the Federal Meat Inspection Act was implemented, and that made it a crime to adulterate meat. You could thank Fannie and Sarah for that. The Hepburn Act replaces the Elkins Act, and it's further protection for Americans concerning railroad rebates, and it reduces the economic favoritism formerly granted to the Big Six cattle barons. And finally, the Pure Food and Drug Act, it was created and it provided additional protections regarding meat products that led to the creation of the Food and Drug Administration. So I found these to be incredibly fascinating and worthwhile. Fannie and Sarah don't get credit for it. People don't know about it. I feel like a historical archaeologist in some really interesting way, and made this part of the story. Now, I'll tell you this, that I was able to tell much of this in the musical. I wasn't able to convey this in the TV series. And that's kind of fascinating from a creator, writer, producer, storyteller point of view, because in musicals, you can get away telling certain things and saying certain things. Right. And in TV shows, you can't. And in the musical and in the lyrics, I was able to provide exposition, essentially, because lyrics are exposition. And so I was able to provide exposition to, a fun, hopefully enjoyable hip hop beat. And really, it's a history lesson. And that's what Hamilton was. And I thought, well, Hamilton is a history hip hop rap thing. I'm going to do a history hip hop rap thing. And that was kind of how all of those all of those pieces came together and what my thinking was going into it.
Look, I'm not a rapper, obviously, and I don't pretend to be. But I'm fascinated, and I assume you're not really a rapper in your, in your regular life. But I'm really curious, why didn't you just go the route of a regular musical? Find a composer, you write the lyrics or you write the music, tunes, modern tunes, contemporary, but to go rap, to go into that hip hop style, to try to get that rhythmic thing. And it's fascinating because in a way, it works for the period. Like that period is so hard edged and it's so riot. I mean, it is street, it's gangsta. I guess, now I sound like a really old white man. But the idea that it's really down in the street. How did you do that?
I'll tell you how that sort of came about. It was a serious struggle. And when I said at the beginning, it's really hard to make a TV show, it's even more difficult to mount a significant theatrical production. And I know you know that.
No, and I know that.
So what's more difficult, climbing Mount Everest or Mount Kilimanjaro? I mean, they're both like impossible things to do, especially if you're not a trained mountain climber, right? And so I've written for TV, but I'm not produced for network level prestige period thriller television series. I mean, we're talking about, a $5 million per episode, plus or minus a couple million per show, which I'm not self-producing this, right? I mean, this is Netflix, this is Hulu, this is Amazon, this is Showtime, this is major streaming sort of stuff. So Jeff Mustard's not making this. Jeff Mustard wants to, hopefully co-produce and sell his TV show, right? And so that's hard in itself. And it's especially hard to do if you don't have, a major significant agent. Right. The Broadway thing is even more difficult for a million other reasons. And so I literally was in some moderate form of depression for about a month and change because I knew I wanted to make this as a musical of some sort. There was no way I was going to get the attention of a composer. There was no way I was going to get the attention of a Broadway producer type. It just wasn't going to happen. And to retain somebody to do that, it's a multi-tens of thousands of dollars sorts of thing. And so I struggled with, what the heck do I do with this? And really, I just said, you know what? I didn't know I couldn't do it, and I didn't know I could do it. And so I just thought that I'm going to give this a shot in the rap genre. And that's when I said I spent like 6 weeks literally listening to multiple hundreds, if not thousands of rap beats from all over the internet till I found something that I felt met the emotional resonance of the songs that I wrote, because that's the magic of music and music writing and music production, is getting the right emotional resonance from your music that marries with your lyrics in a way that it all sort of blends together in a beautiful souffle of material. And it was at once a tremendous hardship. And then at the end of the day, when we did what we did, it was a great relief to see, well, the experiment, I think, could be paying off. Anyway, that was...
Did you ever consider the idea of doing a documentary film or writing a novel or, finding... I mean, like I had an idea for a movie and I realized who's going to make my movie. So I started writing as a novel. And I'm, this far away from finishing it. And, I don't know if it's good or bad. I guess the audience will decide. Ultimately, it's the audience that decides. But at least there's another outlet. Did you ever think about a documentary film? Or
not really so much, because it strikes me that the material is so rich, it's so visual, it's so cinematic. The story is so interesting. And by my fictionalization of a number of characters, it becomes a family-friendly film, which I'm I'm really proud of something that is, truly a Disney kind of style family entertainment, Pixar kind of show. So no, as a documentary, it never really struck me. But here's my kind of my fantasy version of what happens here. Whether it becomes a Broadway musical first or a TV series, it's a win either way, right? And so whatever goes first, I think then, if it's a TV show, it becomes a Broadway show because of the notoriety that hopefully it would achieve through whatever success it might earn. And I myself want to turn it into a feature film. Once I have all the material written, I'll have about 300 pages. I'm at 230 now. I'll just cut it down and we'll have the trifecta of feature film, right? TV series and Broadway play. That's the grand plan.
Right. Because most people out there may not know who you are, do you want to give them a little background of what you've done before and what you're working on now? Like just to kind of give them a sense of who Jeffrey Mustard is?
Sure. Well, I've been in advertising, marketing, PR for most of, all my adult life. That's what I've done professionally and made a living at. Advertising, marketing, public relations, while also being a writer, producer, and director. So in my own advertising company, I would make TV commercials, radio commercials. I produced infomercials. I produced an award-winning documentary. So I've been in and around film and TV for a very long time. I was in a couple of made-for-TV films back in the early 90s that were, I think, on Showtime or Cinemax or something like that. I've done a lot of work in front of the camera and as an actor for stage and screen. Did some work with Philip Michael Thomas, who was Tubbs from, obviously from, way back when, Miami Vice. That was fun. And then a lot of stuff behind the camera. So, I kind of been in front of and behind and kind of know this world in a very real way. And have been was the president of the Screenwriters Guild, South Florida Screenwriters Guild, for a while. Not affiliated with the Writers Guild of America. I don't want there to be any confusion there. And so I've been in and around writing and producing for all of my adult life, and have written a number of screenplays. A number of them either under contract, writing for money. Some of them, most of them not produced, but I get paid to write, and it's like anything else. You get paid to do what you do, and then whatever happens, happens sort of thing. So, but in the past 5 years, I've spent time working on these various TV projects. So I'll just throw a couple of titles out there, and I have websites for them, and hopefully one of these things hits, and then the others come along, right? You know how that goes. You're an overnight success after working at it for 20 years. It's one of those things. But
Private Schminkel made it at the age of 72.
So a couple of years ago, I wrote this TV show called Exile from Cuba, and I call it the sort of Cuban Count of Monte Cristo. And it's a story of love and revenge. I mean, I know it's controversial for South Florida for a lot of reasons, but in terms of it being an extraordinarily rich time with a tremendous story value, it's all there. That's exilefromcuba.com. I've got I think a really exciting website with a great promo reel and a lot of interesting character pieces that I wrote and produced. The value of being a producer is I can go into a recording studio and work with actors like yourself and, come out with something that is really representative of the show. And so I've got a bunch of those sorts of things up on exilefromcuba.com. But most recently, I know you're familiar with my George Floyd tribute song that I wrote when I became outraged by the George Floyd incident. And so after about a week of watching it on CNN, I sat down and I ended up writing a George Floyd tribute song. And that turned out to be a 2-piece movement song. And I basically have started a website and a company around that dedicated to social justice. So that can be found at equaljusticestudios.com. And that's happening. There's a lot happening for me in the music world now. I never really thought that would be the case, but I'm excited. I'm excited about music because you know what? You could write your lyrics and if you're hooked up to a studio or with someone that you can work with, you can go into a studio and you can actually see your work becomes like a finished piece in anywhere from a couple of weeks to a month or something. You could work on a TV show or a Broadway play, and it never happens, right? I mean, you know that. And so I found it satisfying to actually see something complete. It was very satisfying to actually walk into a studio with, like, a piece of paper, and then 6 hours later or 2 days later, you got your thing. And that's what we did with Boycott. One of the reasons that I wanted to do the music for Boycott, and this is in total transparency world, is it gave me an opportunity to create essentially marketing material to promote the show, because people will listen to music. Hopefully they'll respond to it. Hopefully they'll like it. And hopefully they'll want to, see more of it or hear more of it. You didn't know it at the time, and I didn't know it at the time, but, you ended up playing a really important part in kind of helping this thing to become a reality.
And you have a website for Boycott, right? You have a website. What is it?
There's two. There's a website, and then there's the Facebook page. And the website is pretty robust, and it's got a lot of very interesting things on it. So it's boycott1902.com, very easy to remember. The same exact thing for Facebook. If you just go on Facebook and you do Boycott 1902, it's an extremely rich Facebook page, only because we took so much of the material that we created in the studio that people saw in the videos that we did here. And I want to explain what people saw in that lead up in the videos, because it's important. There was some repeat material. What I ended up doing as a producer when we were recording our material was they were all standalone songs, and each song told its own story. So there were these 6 songs, and what I did was we produced these videos for each song. So there were these 6 songs that essentially, so everybody knows what they just saw, they were these freestanding bits that I just basically quilted together edge to edge. So each one was like in the neighborhood of 3.5 minutes to 4 minutes or something. And it was a standalone piece for Too Much Greed. It was a standalone piece for Barons Beware. It was a standalone piece for the Fannie Levy piece that you did with Sandy Stock. I really hope people listen to that stuff, because the storytelling, I think, is great. The delivery is great. I only did this as proof of concept. I mean, if it goes over this way and somebody goes, Jeff Mustard, man, we love what you did and we want it this way, as you would say, sei gesund, and if somebody wants, some big producer type wants to come along and say, hey, man, we love your lyrics and we want to kind of do it another way, I'm going to go, okay. And so, that's sort of some of that background.
That's great. So, okay, everybody out there that's listening, go to Boycott 1902, find it, wherever on the internet.com, figure it out. What excited me is the idea that this very Jewish story from 1902 suddenly takes on this amazing relevance and being presented in a way that not only renews the history, which is what I really want to see for all of us, to relearn this amazing history, but also see it in a contemporary way that can appeal across generations. So get out there. Thank you, Jeff. I'm very excited to be a part of it.
And likewise, a pleasure. Thank you, Avi.